Howdy, folks. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show. This is Dr. Richard Owen, and Miss Ima Surefire is in the house. Say hello, Ima.
Howdy, folks. How y'all doing?
Welcome back or welcome aboard. As you probably know, but just in case you don't, we are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show. All one word, DOCOWENSHOW. So ping us, like us, follow us, poke us, zap us, tell your friends about us, whatever. Reach out and tell us what you think. We would appreciate it. Or if you want a direct line, you can always email us at either IMA, I-M-A, at docowenshow.com or doc@docowenshow.com. Before we go much further, we'd like to pay recognition to and to give a little shout out to our affiliate stations on the Red State Talk Radio Network. Ima will lead it off with everything east of the Mississippi, and then I'll do the stations west of the Mississippi. Take it away, madam.
Okay. The first is WDDQ, FM 92.1, Adele, Georgia. WSFB, 1490 AM. Talk, 97.7 FM in Quitman, Georgia. WJNW, AM, 1650 in Hermitage, Tennessee. WMQL, Radio FM 105.5 in Brevard, North Carolina, and Tax Pro Radio in Gainesville, Georgia.
And west of the Mississippi, we have Talk Radio AM 1620 KTFL in Gilbert, Arizona. And right here in Texas, the Kaufman County Talk Radio AM 1680 KCTR up in Terrell, Texas. Looks like we need to do a little bit of work on stations west of the Mississippi, I think.
Looks that way.
We have a really exciting show ahead with a lot to cover, so let's get started in our traditional manner. Ima will provide an inspirational quote, and I'll do one or two leadership quotes. Ima, take it away.
Tonight's quote comes from Mahatma Gandhi. You must be the change you wish to see in the world.
These always seem to segue together. I've got one leadership quote for you tonight. It's from a fellow by the name of Peter Drucker. Mr. Drucker is a very well-known author and management consultant current day. I believe author of the 1 Minute Manager. We've quoted from Mr. Drucker before.
Yes, the name's familiar.
He says, effective leadership is not about making speeches or being liked. Leadership is defined by results, not attributes. Interesting. And as a vote of confidence, we always go through this after our mayoral election in San Antonio. San Antonio, Texas is the capital, ground zero, the epicenter for constitutional, Christian, conservative, Hispanic voters in America. Y en español, San Antonio, Texas es la capital, la zona cero, el epicentro para cristiana, los votantes hispanos constitucionales, conservadores in America. We are proof it can be done, it has been done, it will continue to be done. We have got a lot to cover and a very interesting interview with a fellow by the name of Jim Gibson tonight from the Texas Border Volunteers. Not to mention Uncle Bocce is on the phone and will be joining us to give us a 10-minute, roughly, education. I've forgotten exactly what year we left off, but I think I remember it was something about schools and public schools, and so I'm going to kind of lead into that with a couple of articles, one in particular. The first of which I always like to give a shout out and add a little bit of help to folks that are trying to get started in this medium, either on the internet or on AM radio or whatever. And there's a guy out there that I refer to every once in a while. He needs a break. He's on, like midday during the day on a few channels around the country. I don't know his last name. His first name is Rush. And so, if you get an opportunity, you ought to try to listen to him. It seems that he and I were totally on the same page today after last night's cage fight, as Ted Cruz referred to it. And he was exactly right. I think that the GOP, little e, for establishment, the establishment Republicans would absolutely prefer to see Hillary Clinton elected, if not one of their candidates. They are more hell-bent to beat down conservatives than anything I have ever seen. I thought it was rough for the last few election cycles for the conservative voice to break through. And and they've just come back upon us with a vengeance. And the deal is, they would rather see Hillary elected because that continues the free-for-all in terms of the money and the handouts and the lobbyists and their current way of life. So even though they are a Republican, they are in the federal government, and they're very dependent upon maintaining the status quo, even if they do shake it up a little bit or put on some sort of a theater for the rest of us to watch. And the fact that the Trumpinator and Ben Carson and Fiorina and Ted Cruz are the ones at the top. The only candidate they've got at the top is Mario. Isn't that his name? Yeah. And he's a turncoat. I mean, he's a guy that went around the country as the spokesperson for the Gang of Eight, talking about amnesty. Everything he says, I mean, he last night, he's very, very well-spoken. He's a bright young man. He presents a very solid front. He's very comfortable in his skin and what he's saying. But he's equally comfortable no matter which side of the fence he's on. And he works both sides of the fence depending on the situation. That's a scary thing. All right? It makes me uncomfortable because he's easy to like. I mean, he's easy to like, and he's relatively easy to trust. And he's got a background that we like to hear about. But trust me, he's an establishment candidate. He's the only establishment candidate in the top 5. So from where I'm coming from, he's the one to watch, and not from a good perspective. I want to give you a little article that I found. It came out on the 23rd of October, so it's relatively recent. The White House, and this is a lead into Uncle Bocce, because he was talking about schools, et cetera, last week, and I think we're going to do a little bit more of it this week and how they got started. He can correct me if I'm wrong when he gets here. The White House administration, via a U.S. Department of Education policy document, has sounded an enrollment call to schools across the nation, pressing them to get as many illegals declared official students as possible and reminding them in no uncertain terms that it's the law. The educators, school, and campuses are to draw upon the tips and examples in the guide that they publish to better support undocumented youth and ultimately move us closer to the promise of college and career readiness for all. Federal law requires the education of all students, no matter their immigration status. Illegals actually worry about their immigration status so much it affects their academic performance. So we need to make sure that the educators make allowances for this, undue pressure that they're under of being illegal immigrants. Think back to your childhood. When you were not telling the truth, or when you were doing something that was maybe you knew your parents weren't going to approve of, you had a tendency to mess up. you had a tendency to mess up small things because there was a thought thread running through your head that kept you from being focused. So you would forget things, you would drop things, it's only natural. So that's what these illegals are going through, because they know that they're not being true to what's going on. Even a child knows better than a lot of adults what's right and what's wrong. What they learn as they grow up is what's right and what's permissible. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that one. The students to which the guide refers are part of Obama's Deferred Action of Childhood Amnesty programs, which grants the rights for certain illegals to stay in America and pursue education goals. Besides providing high-quality instruction and supports, another important way that schools, colleges, and education professionals can help undocumented youth is by sharing information about DACA with youth and their families, the document reads. Providing this information at the early childhood and elementary school levels may be helpful because though the children would not meet DACA's threshold age guideline, their parents or family members might meet the guidelines. In other words, they're recruiting the illegal aliens through their children. Is exactly what they're doing. Okay, with that little lead-in from the school, let's see if we can have some words of wisdom from Uncle Bocce, and then we'll branch off and kind of circle back and talk a little bit with the one of the major border volunteers here in Texas. Uncle Bocce, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here. How are you guys?
Fine. Where's your? Wait. Hey, man, you're supposed to say hello in Italian. How's everybody? They might think I'm having an imposter on their radio if you don't say hello in Italian.
Ciao, amici.
Okay.
Ciao.
So what's buona suerte mean?
Buona suerte means good afternoon.
Oh, I can't say it. How should I say good evening? You don't know.
Buona suerte. You did get me. Oh, fuck. Oh my goodness. How bad am I?
Okay, you want me to give you a break while you go to the Italian dictionary on your computer, or you want to take it up?
No, that's okay. No, that's okay.
Okay. Okay, dive into it. Was I right about the schools? Is that where you left us off last time?
Well, that's where we left us off, and I wasn't intending to talk any more about the public school system now.
That's quite all right.
We'll revisit that. But the points that you made were very, very good, because public schools is an American tradition. The only problem is that over the years that evil people have decided to use our educational system to indoctrinate our kids with what they think. Just like it happened with Hitler, just how it happened in communist China.
It's a worldwide model. Yes.
It is. It really is.
And it doesn't end well.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
But anyway, tonight we're going to look at something, and this is a very interesting phenomenon. We know we've talked about how people from Europe, mostly right now from the British Isles, came to the United States, or not to the United States, came to the New World because they wanted to get out from under the Church of England and the tyranny that was going on with the kings. So they came here to establish the new colonies based on the fact that they would be free to practice their religion as they saw fit. Well, tonight we're going to start seeing that not only did that happen because of the British coming here and establishing freedom of religion, but even in New England, the colonies, the same exact thing was happening. There was a clergyman, he's a Puritan, named Thomas Hooker, and he became very, very disgruntled and dissatisfied with the rigid practices of the government of the Puritan Church in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. They were very rigid. So he had other ideas about how a church should be governed and all of that. So what he did is he got a group of people, he led them, and he established the Hartford, Connecticut. I was trying to think the colony in Hartford, Connecticut, where he could be free to practice what is. Now, what he brought, he had a sermon about how things should be done. And what they did is they took the principles of that sermon, and they put it into something called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting about that is that is the first written constitution in the American colonies.
Ah.
And where did they get that from? Because Britain at the time certainly did not have a written constitution. So here they are seeing that and later on, the National Center for Constitutional Studies, if you remember the 5,000-year leap,
yeah.
They had 28 principles, and one of the principles that they found in American government that is essential was principle number 18, and it says, the unalienable rights of the people are most likely to be preserved if the principles of government are set forth in a written constitution. So we see that happening here early on.
What year? Where are you timeline wise?
18. I'll go back again. 1636.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where we're going to do more on this particular year next week as well.
16.
Anyway,
you're at 1636.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And people are thinking already, and they are establishing those principles that our government was based on.
Okay.
Now that Constitution, if you want to call it that. Oh, by the way, just a little aside trivia. That is why today Connecticut, its motto is the Constitution State. I never understood that, but now I do understand that. So they claim that as being one of the things that Connecticut has contributed.
I didn't understand that either. Good job. I bet our listeners didn't know that.
Yeah,
unless
exactly.
they happen to be from Connecticut. Okay.
Yeah, and it consisted of a preamble, which really was more or less like the Mayflower Compact.
Right.
Yeah, where the people agreed together that they would allow themselves to be governed by a certain order. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Bocce, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Let's have a little conversation.
Yes, sir.
What I hear you saying, and you know what I like to do that sort of halfway through your history lesson, if you haven't noticed that, to make sure that I understand. All right. Not just me. Well, yeah, me for sure. Listeners included. What you're saying is that as early as And you've been on, we do this every week and we've been doing it for a while. As early as almost like the 1500s, but certainly the late 1500s and early 1600s, the folks that lived on this land that we now call America and the United States of America, the folks that came over here and that lived here and sort of went about their business and living collectively were very much into individual rights and liberties that they absolutely collectively protected for each other. Isn't that right?
Exactly.
So the current day, what the world calls conservatives, and I rail at that. I prefer to be called a patriot. Our roots and thought processes are very, 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 very deep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to get. I mean, just imagine this happened in what we call the New World, which is now the United States of America.
And there wasn't even a Congress to pass a law to tell them they had those rights.
Exactly. It was the people. It was the people. And they were separated from the king, from the monarchy.
Right.
And here in this cauldron of liberty, look at the ideas that they are coming up with. Because they're free. They're able to do what they need to do for themselves.
Uh-huh. So
they are becoming very rugged individuals. Very quickly, I just want to tell you what's contained in the orders of Connecticut. Here are some of the things. They met twice a year in April and September.
Okay.
So, and one of the things they had in there, it's the first time we see that I know of term limits. They said no man can serve as governor more than once every 2 years. So that they had that restriction. They got their nominations in April, but it was September when they actually elected their leaders.
Okay.
Okay, and the election was by free men. At this point in time, it was only still church members who owned property.
Right.
The others didn't, but they were still representing everyone.
Right.
Okay, and let's see here. Oh, and there was no religious test. Okay.
Okay.
Which again, we in America celebrate the fact that everybody's free to do their religious things without any government oppression.
Yeah, we've had a bit of that conversation. I mean, the
exactly.
separation of church and state it's a myth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another significant thing, I'm running up against time here, is
Yes.
that these fundamental orders had no reference whatsoever to the authority of the crown.
Right.
So, independent thinking. And here's some of the things that they did. They adopted and repealed laws, imposed taxes, distribute land, apprehend and punish people for misdemeanors. They enact legislation to promote the general good, and I really want to have a conversation about that.
Okay, make a note. You get 10 minutes a week then.
Yeah, okay. but we'll have to. And so this was how they set up their government for themselves.
Okay.
The people elected, but they gave permission to the general court, and the general court was the one who actually governed the people.
Okay.
That's our brief for this week.
You did, Uncle Bocce, you did great. You nailed it.
Well, thank you.
Now, something we were remiss in doing last week, give everybody your email address so they can reach out to you with thanks and praise and various and other inputs, because, I've been doing this 3 years and nobody's ever told me good job, and you were on for the first week and got fan mail out I had to get a bigger email box just to hold your fan mail. Goodness
gracious. Well, I appreciate that. But yes, my email is Uncle Bocce, one word, UNCLEBACI, @DocOwenShow.com.
How about that? You advertised both of us in one email address. Good job.
Absolutely. I think that's and please, people, if you find anything that I'm saying objectionable or not true, please send me an email, because I'm looking for the truth here and I want to promote the truth.
Yeah.
So
if you find anything he says objectionable, do not carbon copy me, because I like it.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Uncle Bocce, hit the mute and stay tuned with us, will you?
Okay, I sure will.
Thanks,
Bye,
Bud. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Good job. That was Uncle Bocce and Uncle Bocce's brief. He's on weekly with a little 10-minute history lesson. We are walking our way through the colonies, building up to the Constitution. We want everyone to know, mostly the young people, where your rights come from. And it's not the government. Okie doke. And that was Uncle Bocce. That's his good night signal. Before we get into the conversation that I had with Mr. Gibson, I would like to address something that's top of mind and troubling. It goes back to what I said before we talked to Uncle Bocce about the establishment GOP. We have just, the Congress, the House of Representatives, has just elected a replacement for John Boehner. It's a fellow by the name of Paul Ryan. Mr. Ryan, you may remember, was the vice presidential candidate along stage with Mitt Romney. Here's what bothers me the most about that decision, and it should bother you. Prior to a press meeting, Ryan met with various caucuses and gave them these conditions. Number one, every faction of the Republicans in the House must support him or he doesn't run. Number two, a return to regular order where all proposed bills must come through committees first. Only Ryan will decide which bills will make it to the floor for a vote. Number three, he will not be responsible for campaigning or raising money. Give that job to someone else. He doesn't have the time for it. Number four, elimination of the Jefferson rule, or possible use of motions to vacate the speaker. The Jefferson rule was put in there by Thomas Jefferson so that the House of Representatives could recall, if you will, internally their speaker. If the composition of the House changed, they could recall the speaker. He wants to do away with that rule. In other words, if I'm going to run, I'm going to be a dictator. That's what he told them. So basically, that's what they've agreed to. And the way this thing was conducted, it was a take it or leave it, and he really didn't care. He came in, he spoke, he laid down the rules, and he walked out without answering questions or allowing questions to be raised. Mr. Ryan, you better do the right thing. You better do the right thing. You've been given an opportunity of a lifetime to do the right thing. And from what I've seen, I don't think you have the guts for it. He's announced his chief of staff will be from a Chamber of Commerce lobbyist. That may not ring any bells for you. Let me give you a hint. The fellow's name is Tom Donahue, will be his chief of staff. And if you trace any tentacle of globalist advancement, think Agenda 21, from D.C. back to its origin, you'll find Donahue and the Chamber of Commerce at the nucleus. It was Donahue in 2011 who seized upon the unlimited finance opportunity, used K Street to take over CPAC, the conservative PAC, and announced his plans to attack the Tea Party insurgent politicians. This is Paul Ryan's chief of staff. This is the guy you have to go through to get an audience with the now king of the House of Representatives. And if you want to know a little bit about, I suggest you do some homework on Mr. Ryan. And just so you'll know, he voted as a congressman to support every form of bailout that was ever offered. All right? And as a parting gesture, Mr. Boehner and the House of Representatives, with Dictator Ryan now in charge, have given Obama's administration an absolute blank check until they are out of office in mid-2017. There will be no more budget discussions. There will be no more debt limit. They can spend all they can spend between now and the middle of 2017. All I can tell you is my gut reaction is it's going to get real ugly because there's going to be very little, if any to none, resistance to what the progressives are going to try to press through executive order between now and 2017. Very, very ugly. It made me think about something having to do with my age and position. Over the next 18 months, I'm probably going to be thinking and get to say quite often, yes, I am certainly old enough to know better, but I'm also old enough to not give a damn. It's going to get tough. Let's have a conversation with Mr. Jim Gibson. Mr. Gibson is with the Texas Border Volunteers. He's a stand-up guy. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and we'll be back afterwards. Thanks. We are about to have a conversation with a young man by the name of Jim Gibson. And Jim is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gibson, an officer in the Texas Border Volunteers. Correct name?
Thank you, Doc, for having me on.
Yeah.
Actually, I am no longer on as an officer.
Okay.
Officer with TBV. had nothing to do with the organization. It was strictly a personal decision based on personal issues in my private life and a few health reasons and so forth. Having said that, I do still function as the media coordinator for the organization in terms of kind of being the middleman, setting up interviews and scheduling visits and so forth.
Okay.
To various media outlets around the country.
Okay. So you're going to schedule. So you're going to introduce me to somebody that knows what they're talking about.
Yes, sir.
I have had the wonderful opportunity to hear Jim present at least 2 times that I remember very distinctly, and probably a third where he was in with some other folks. So he is very knowledgeable. That's the reason that I tease him about it. And I can understand, being an officer in a volunteer organization is a completely, shall we say, different skill set than when you are dealing with non-volunteers or you're working as a volunteer as a non-officer. So I can certainly understand you gave your time, and we're all thankful for it. Let's dive into it. Jim, tell my audience what kind of work you do. What's the primary purpose? What's the goal of your organization?
Doc, the primary goal, and actually we have 2 objectives in our mission statement, but the primary goal is to work closely with Border Patrol and other law enforcement agencies that operate in Brooks County in order to identify and report illegal aliens that are trespassing on private property. We have no apprehension authority or detention authority at all, but as an extra set of eyes and ears for the Border Patrol and law enforcement, we are able to enhance their abilities in the field, if you would.
Okay.
So that's our primary focus. The second part of the mission statement or focus is that using what we've learned in the field and our experiences, we're very proactive in trying to convey that information to the general public in various settings, as you previously alluded to.
So it's my understanding, in all of these things, I mean, I'm going from what I remember, you're really not focused on being armed, although you may have some participants who are.
As a matter of fact, Doc, all of our participants are armed.
Okay.
I need to clarify for the audience what that means.
Yeah, because I remember there was a segue to it when you answered that question before.
Yes, sir. We worked, as I stated previously, on private property as guests of the landowners.
Right.
And as landowners, they do have, obviously, the right to set certain parameters. One of those parameters is that we can carry our handguns concealed, just like we do under Texas law in the public sector, be it at Walmart or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And the weapon must be concealed in the proper manner. We are not permitted to carry any kind of long guns.
Oh, okay.
That was, again, an agreement with the landowners as a condition for operating on their property. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, we have a close interaction, as I mentioned, with Border Patrol.
Right.
And we feel that the presence of long guns, when they arrive on the scene that we call them into, could add to the distraction to them. They need to be focused on the illegals that they're trying to deal with, not guys standing around with a bunch of AKs or ARs.
Of course. Right.
And the second thing is we do, as I mentioned, have media that comes in from time to time, and we try to portray a professional image. And the long guns is one of those things that once the press gets a hold of it in certain segments,
Yep.
It'll be blown out of proportion, and we're answering questions that we shouldn't have to be answering.
Yeah, and it would really not be the point. So,
That's correct, sir.
you're
Absolutely correct.
You're absolutely right. So, and plus you're there in a very, very much in a support role, and anything you do beyond what you just said, I would think might have a tendency to escalate. In other words, it could call into call into escalation a situation that you really don't. That's not why you're there. You're not there to start anything. You're there to.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Doc, because it kind of lets me segue into something else that's important about that.
There you go.
We have to keep two things ever present in our mind, and that's safety of all the members, and equally as important is the liability of the landowners.
Right.
Because if we do something illegal or that can be construed as illegal, whether somebody claims harassment or abuse or assault or whatever, typically it's going to be the landowner that's going to be dragged into court.
Oh, sure.
It's happened before. I can cite examples of that. So we're very cognizant of the fact that we do not want to put the landowners in a position of having to wind up in court somewhere defending their property.
Yeah, you don't want to give even a hint of aggression
No, sir.
coming out of your guys, and the more in the shadows, let's say, that you stay, I would think the more effective you could be.
That is absolutely correct, and it's why we wear camouflage, and our objective is to stay concealed, to keep these groups cohesive so that Border Patrol doesn't have to go 40 different directions trying to chase people.
Right. So by my questions, you should be impressed with how much you've taught me. Over the course of the last few times I've heard you speak.
Yes, sir. You're right on your game there.
Our target audience, I won't tell you that it is 100% pure, but who we really like to speak to and help understand where we're coming from are young folks, if I've not told you that before. In the, let's say, 16 to 30 category, what the mainstream media loosely calls millennials.
Yes, sir.
And when I hear you talk and when I see the folks that are involved in your organization, I don't see young people there. Is it a matter of not having the time, them not having the time, or not being aware, or, I mean, I could see them being as a real asset if they were properly trained and coached on how to do these things.
Yes, sir, and it's a very good point, and I think it's a combination of things that you mentioned.
Okay.
I'm speaking from my second life experience as a high school teacher.
Yes, sir.
Young people have a different set of priorities, and it amounts to the fact, and because of those priorities, then that equates to not having the time or the interest either, because they don't get involved in the nuances and the details like us older folks do.
Okay.
I wish I had an answer on how to change that. If I could speak to a young person, I would tell them that what we're doing and what we're talking about today is their future. And at some point, that future is going to be here, and they're going to have to deal with it.
Right.
And I hope, and we all hope, that's involved in this, as well as you with the program, is that we can convince those young people that you may not have to get fully engaged, but you need to be aware of what's coming down the road. Because at some point, you're going to be the voters, and you're going to be the activists that are going to have to deal with it.
Right.
So you need to start prepping yourself now.
Well, I would think that if we were successful in recruiting a few, or at least putting the word out there that the option is available, that there'd be some things they could do to help you guys out that are not necessarily on the front line, that don't take them going, being gone for weeks at a time, et cetera. But, maybe some help with logistics, some helps with moving things around point to point.
Well, I tell you, one and what comes to mind was the last meeting that I spoke at where you were there, and we talked about it on the show. And it was a young man there from the South Side.
Yes.
Chamber of Commerce. I forgot the gentleman's name.
But I know who you're talking about, yes.
Okay. And he has offered to bring me in and do a presentation to his group. This is an area where some of the younger folks, and I know there are some young conservatives, political activist types, that could get engaged and say, hey, Mr. Gibson or John Doe or whoever from CBV, would you come in and give a presentation to my group?
Right.
And we would be more than glad to do that. So, and I think it would go a long way in not only helping us, but engaging some of those younger people in the facts of what's going on in South Texas. That would be a terrific way for them to help us out.
Okay.
I think that gentleman you were mentioning is Andres Holiday.
I'm sorry, you have me at a distance. I just cannot think of his name.
Yeah, it's Andres Holiday.
30 minutes ago.
Well, we've bumped into him on several occasions, and he is a very right-minded young man.
Yes, sir.
And real conscious of what's going on, and he's a nice guy. We've been trying to hook things up to kind of have him on the show. So, yeah, and I'm sure, and I'm certain that that's who it is. That Alma's right. So, thanks, Alma.
You're welcome.
Talk to me about how either good things are or bad things are. Jim, we know each other a little bit, but maybe you don't know. I'm a glass is half full kind of guy. I like to come at things with the intention of a positive outcome. Let's put it that way, which means I'm not a gloom and doom guy. I mean, the numbers are bad. You know, we're in Texas. We know the numbers are bad. I get to broadcast all over the country, and you guys are just going to have to trust me. The numbers are bad. They're worse than what the mainstream media is telling you. And Jim could go into chapter and verse of the increases in numbers and the increases in what we call OTMs, which is other than Mexican. And it's about 50-50 right now, isn't it? Or is it worse than that, Jim?
Well, I'm gonna throw you a curveball here, Doc.
Okay.
We just got the official numbers out of Falfurrias.
Okay.
For the last fiscal year that just closed out on their apprehension. This year, and forgive the details, 15,241 were apprehended by Falfurrias Border Patrol.
Okay.
Now, compare that to last year, previous fiscal year, 2014. They apprehended 36,361.
Okay.
That's a 58% decrease in apprehensions this past year.
Okay.
The question obviously is what do you attribute that?
I'm sorry, but that's not a curveball to me. That means that they've figured out how to go around the Falfurrias checkpoint.
Well,
because it was obviously one of the better ones.
This goes to, we believe, based on evidence and information unofficial that we've received from officials, but we're pretty sure that this 58% reduction has a great deal to do with the increased presence of technology and boots on the ground in that area.
Wouldn't that be nice?
You've got the DPS surge that started taking place. There was a heavy concentration of DPS in Brooks County. You have the Border Brotherhood of Texas.
I think for your information, the Doc Owen show saw a lot of that. We were down there during that period of time, so keep going.
And then in addition to that, in Brooks County, you have the Border Brotherhood of Texas, which is a reserve deputy program where licensed peace officers from other jurisdictions volunteer their time to come in and support, augment the Brooks County Sheriff's Office, which only has 4 deputies, last I heard.
Yeah.
There's about 30 or something of those individuals. Then you have which is, and this is no secret, the aerostats, that big balloon that they fly down south of us that has every kind of technology you can imagine on it.
Oh, cool.
When you put all this technology and boots on the ground, and we think, as you indicated, that they've now shifted their routes further west.
Right.
They said, okay, we can't get through Brooks County, we're going to go further west. And cartels are not stupid.
I was just going to say, we should never assume that they're stupid nor broke.
You don't get a multi-billion-dollar industry here by being stupid.
That's right.
So, and they have their assets and their resources on the ground as well. So we think that law enforcement presence, that technology has forced the traffic to move elsewhere. Now I can't tell you, because I don't have the numbers, if the overall apprehension rate for Border Patrol across the board has gone down. I
Okay.
don't know that. Those numbers are not out of DHS yet that I know of.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Alan.
I have a question. When you were saying that these people are moving west, one county that comes to my mind is Starr County. Have you seen any kind of increase there or heard of any?
No, ma'am, and I'll be honest with you, I don't get a lot of information from those other counties. Occasionally something will pop up on Facebook or on a press report or something, but I just don't get routine information for that to make any kind of judgment one way or the other.
Because you guys are broken down into, I don't want to, well, I was going to use the word cells, but that has a negative connotation to it.
Yes,
so you're broken down into geographic territories.
We only, because of the limitations on equipment and even manpower for that matter, we are limited to operating on about the 40,000 acres we've got in Brooks County.
Oh, that's
we're stretched thin just to do that.
Goodness gracious.
And there have been ranchers that have asked us in other parts of the area to come in and operate, and logistically, we just can't do that.
That's what you just mentioned is probably as big as some states in our audience.
You get a real appreciation of just how big Texas is when you get Illinois.
I'll bet you do. It's a long way between stop and goes, isn't it?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of places we can't even get cell phone service. And
you mentioned that before.
Yeah, it stretches your abilities from a comm standpoint to the limit sometimes.
I'm sure that's true. Well, so as we talked about kind of before we started the podcast, as all of these folks, even though it's a reduced number, are coming across, there's I don't want to say a push because it hadn't gotten above the level of going on in the background right now. But there's a lot of concern in my listening audience as well as in my mind, to tell you the truth, about sanctuary cities. We only have, to the best of my knowledge, there are 13 of them reported in Texas. But over the last 3 or 4 months, there's been a huge jump in them on a nationwide basis. And my concern is, if I'm just thinking about it logically, and I'm putting myself on the other side of the fence, no pun intended, and I'm coming to the United States, just the word sanctuary city is going to act like a magnet to me of where, just like in the old days, the old wild western, the westerns you and I used to watch on TV, the bad guys always had a hole in the wall. As a matter of fact, I think on a lot of the shows it was called the hole in the wall. and that's where they would all go and gather as a sanctuary to hold up and not be bothered until they decided to reach out and go rob a train or something like that, and then they went back to their protected city.
Yes, sir.
So it concerns me that there are areas that are setting themselves up for the same sort of activity. Are you cognizant through the network that you work in that is impactful, that they do have a tendency to draw these folks across the border?
Sure, and I'll give you at least I think valid evidence.
Okay.
What you're saying.
That's what I'm looking. There you go.
We have in the past had situations where groups or individuals that we've encountered actually give up because they run out of food, water, they're hurt, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And in conversations with those people and information we've gotten from Border Patrol, similar conversations, the number one destination seems to be Houston. And it has been for quite a while.
Okay.
And as we all know, Houston is a self-proclaimed, pretty much sanctuary city and has been.
Right.
For some time.
Right.
Recently, and you're aware of this, and probably most of your listeners are, San Antonio, there was a story in WOAI that San Antonio was going to vote to move towards sanctuary city status. I think that if that comes to pass and the word gets out that a lot of those folks that were going to Houston say, well, let's just go straight up here in San Antonio. It's a lot closer.
Oh yeah, it's a lot closer, and there's better cover for them. In other words, they'd have an easier time of blending in with the local population, and that's not to say. I want to be real specific about this. My input, folks, I'm going to interrupt the recording because we're running out of time, and I got something that I really want to tell you about, and it has to do with sanctuary cities. This coming Wednesday, November the 4th, 6 p.m., City Hall, downtown San Antonio, Doc Owen will be speaking to San Antonio City Council. My topic is the difference between being a scallywag and a saint. And it has to do with sanctuary cities. I'm going to explain in no uncertain terms what a scallywag is. It stands for Sanctuary City, as lawless, looting yappers while aborting government. SCALLYWAG. Scallywag's origin is actually in the United States after the Civil War. Southern Democrats used it as a derisive term for people, members of their group, that turned coat and threw in with the Republicans who were supporting emancipation of slaves in the South. So they were called scallywags. That's what I'm using as a term for what you think of as a sanctuary city. I'm going to offer up an alternative called saint. And it's sanctuary assembled in nature's tradition. Think about the conversation that we just had with Uncle Bocce about inalienable rights that have been given to us by God and by nature to liberty, life, and the freedoms and the pursuit of happiness. Those don't come from the Constitution. Those don't come from the government. They can't be taken away by the government. We need to fight this sanctuary city movement that's going to go on. Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, have both come out against it. The progressives, the Democrats, could not care less what the government says. They will press it through and just say, sue me. That's what they've been doing for years. Years upon years. We cannot have it. So we're going to offer an alternative. If you are in San Antonio, have friends in San Antonio, relatives in San Antonio, bring a crowd. We need a crowd at City Hall, 6 p.m., downtown San Antonio, next Wednesday night. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It's going to be the difference between being a scallywag or being a saint. You will find out on which side I'm going to come down, as if I needed to tell you. So I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation with Mr. Gibson. We will pick it up. We've probably got another 15 or 20 minutes with him that we'll do at a later date. But this was very important that we get this word out. It's Wednesday night, 6 p.m., downtown San Antonio, City Hall. It's one of those be there or be square sort of things. You're going to want to learn the difference, the complete difference between scallywag and saint. So please come join us. We're probably getting pretty close to end of time. Ruh-roh. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.